Hey Radicals, hope everybody's having a wonderful, what is this, Wednesday, Thursday? I don't even know what day it is anymore. I think it's Thursday, right? Hope everybody's having a wonderful Thursday afternoon. I wanted to check in with everybody today to talk about the World Economic Forum. And there's a lot of different things I wanted to go over, but really I just wanted to kind of introduce anybody who may have not heard of the World Economic before, just kind of go over what it is, talk about Klaus Schwab, who is the founder of it, and talk about how it's really not a conspiracy theory in the way that we typically talk about conspiracy theories like the Illuminati, for example. The World Economic Forum is something that happens right out in the open, and we're actually going to go through a bunch of the different talks that they had. We're going to hear from Henry Kissinger. We're going to hear from George Soros. We're going to hear from Bill Gates. We're going to hear from a lot of folks. So that's what I wanted to do today. It's probably going to be a longer stream just because there's so much content. And honestly, I can't get to all of it just because there's so much. There's so many talks that they have at this World Economic Forum. It's a multi-day conference where they meet all day long and just talk about all these different issues. So obviously, we're not going to get through all that today. But again, I just wanted to kind of give a bird's eye view for what it is and what they're talking about. And also, generally speaking, how it's not like a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. It is the world's most powerful people meeting in the open, not secretly, but meeting in the open, talking about how they want to influence the planet in a variety of different ways. And some of those ways are quite scary. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into all that, and again, this is a longer stream. And again, I encourage anybody out there, if you'd like to help support me or if you'd like to have a kind of a conversation, please do submit a super chat. That would really help me out. I've had a few folks lately be unable to continue on being patrons. So every little bit helps. As many of you guys know, I left my job, my full-time job in November. So just trying to make the ends meet. And YouTube has been deleting my content. And that's also another reason that I created my Rockfin channel. So again, folks, you do not have to be a premium member. You can sign up for free on Rockfin. My goal is to get all 31,000 of you folks over to Rockfin this year. I know it's a new platform. I know it doesn't have as much content as YouTube, but it's not a censored platform like YouTube. And it's not one where you're going to see a million different commercials every 3 minutes. So Rockfin is great. They have not just anti-imperialist content, they also have some sports content as well. And yeah, you can become a premium member if you'd like. And if you sign up to become a premium member, you'll get access to my new show, Uncensored. And actually tonight, I'm going to be uploading my 9th episode of Uncensored. So the only way to catch that is to head over to Rockfin and become a premium member. And you'll get access to 8 other episodes that I've done. I've interviewed Justin Paglino. That was actually my first in-person interview in 2 years. And that's a 2-hour interview. I also interviewed Fiorella Isabel and Caleb Maupin, Elizabeth Voss, Jeff Young, who's a Democratic anti-war candidate who actually just won his primary in Kentucky, which is amazing. Also, Kit Clarenberg of the Gray Zone, Jimmy Dore, of course, as everybody knows, and Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst, was on my very first episode. So if you'd like to catch all of those interviews, if you'd like to catch tonight's brand new interview, if you'd like to see every week a brand new exclusive interview, all you have to do is go to rockfin.com/Primo Radical and sign up to become a premium member. But again, folks, if you can't afford it, I don't want anybody to have any financial trouble. If you can't afford it, you can become a free member. Just sign up to join Rockfin and you'll get access to all of my content there. All of my other interviews. I recently had Michael Tracy on. I also did an episode with these 3 lovely ladies talking about student loan debt. So yeah, please do sign up, join that. And again, you can follow me on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, on TikTok. I'm also on TikTok. I think I only have like 70 followers there, but that is a new social media platform that I'm putting myself on. And also Telegram. And I really do like Telegram. I understand they have been legally obligated to engage in some censorship of Russian state media due to laws in Europe. However, it is beyond that seemingly a very censorship-free platform, and I like it a lot. So you can follow me there. It's t.me/Primo Radical Show. And yeah, and as always, please do follow me across social media. Sign up for my mailing list at primoradical.com, right there on the homepage. And again, if you can support me financially at all, I would really appreciate it at either patreon.com/Primo Radical or at rockfin.com/Primo Radical and sign up to become a premium member. And again, you can also submit super chats today during today's live stream. So, last thing I just wanted to say is, I mentioned this on my last live stream. I recently did a interview, my first interview ever. Well, technically it was my second interview ever, but I did an interview like 2 weeks ago with this channel, and they put it on their Patreon page, but they didn't put it up on YouTube. So, this was actually my second interview ever, but it was the first one to ever be published. And it's on a new channel called In Depth with Manny. And I had a great half-hour conversation with Manny. He asked lots of great questions. And if you'd like to learn more about me and how I got into podcasting and being a YouTuber, I go over all of that in this interview. So just search for In Depth with Manny, Primo Radical, Episode 1. And yeah, I encourage everybody to listen to that. All right, folks. So before we get into the World Economic Forum, I just want to talk about conspiracy theories for a second. Because, I think a lot of people who are dissidents have been demonized as conspiracy theorists for quite some time. Whether that's, whether that's saying that Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction, for example, those folks were called conspiracy theorists. Or if you had any concerns about what the Bush administration may have known about 9/11 beforehand, I think that it's been clear that they did have some foreknowledge. There was a memo that they received that actually said bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S. with airplanes, something along those lines. So obviously, that ended up not being controversial. And if you've just been paying attention the last several years, conspiracy theorists have been generally right about a lot of things. Now, I'm not talking about flat earthers, or I'm not talking about QAnon when, they would say ridiculous things about Trump's going to win the actual election 3 weeks after inauguration or whatever their claims are. And YouTube, I'm not endorsing that. I'm just stating what some people may have said. I'm not making any sort of claim. And Joe Biden definitely won the election, just so we're all on the same page. And I am abiding by YouTube's terms of services. YouTube, just so you know, I fully believe Joe Biden won the 2020 election, and COVID vaccines are great. So, yeah, anyway, I think that, if you've been paying attention to conspiracy theorists for the last couple of years, they've been proven right about a lot of things. I'll give you just a recent example. Well, the first time that Ray McGovern was ever on this show, back in 2017, April of 2017, he said that Hillary Clinton came up with Russiagate, and that her campaign put it out there and fed it to the media and to intelligence agencies. And that recently, just like last week, was breaking news that this finally, through the Durham investigation, had been, had people found out about this. Ray McGovern was saying this 5 years ago, but it was a conspiracy theory. He was this fringe outside voice, right? So again, generally speaking, I think the conspiracy theorists actually have a pretty good track record. And if you even go back to the history of where that term came from, the term conspiracy theorist, that was invented by the CIA to demonize folks who had questions about John F. Kennedy's assassination. And again, I think all these years later, but from what actually happened that day to the killings of people associated with that conspiracy, like David Ferry, for example, a lot of other folks around the Kennedy assassination got assassinated themselves or died under mysterious circumstances. So the point is, I'm not trying to demonize all conspiracy theorists. Some are right, some are wrong. Some aren't really conspiracy theories even. It's just like following logic to what the actual conclusion would be, which is often in contrast to what the corporate media and intelligence agencies lead us to believe. And I'll also say that the intelligence agencies and the corporate media often engage in conspiracy theories themselves, right? Like Russiagate, for example. Russiagate was a conspiracy theory. It was that Russia conspired with Donald Trump to steal the 2016 election. That was disproven over and over and over again. But did Rachel Maddow ever let it go? No, she constantly kept playing into it night after night after night for years. And it was a conspiracy theory. It was a debunked conspiracy theory. But because it was the establishment saying that, it's not called a conspiracy theory. A conspiracy theory is only ever, that's a term used against people who are leveling some kind of claim against the status quo, against the people in power. If you're just a normal person who's making a claim against the elite, against the establishment, then you're a conspiracy theorist. But if the establishment is trying to get you to believe something that they cannot prove, that's not called a conspiracy theory. So obviously there's a double standard. So beyond that, there's also a lot of secret societies that are subject to conspiracy theories, right? So I have a picture up here of the Bohemian Grove Club, and this is Moloch. And this is actually something that Alex Jones, early in his career, this was something that he uncovered, was that he infiltrated this group. The Bohemian Grove Club is essentially a group of very powerful, wealthy people, politically influential people who meet in the woods in California every summer, and they engage in all kinds of weird rituals. This is a picture of the burning of care. So they have a 40-foot tall statue of a stone owl named Moloch, which, if you've read the Bible, that is the name of a demon. So the name of the 40-foot tall stone statue of an owl is named Moloch, and they burn the effigy of a child in front of it, and this is called the burning of care. And they dress up in robes. And again, these aren't just like weird people like randos out there. These are like the world's most influential people are meeting, like business leaders, political people, bureaucrats, media figures. They're meeting here to engage in rituals like this. They do other things as well. But the point being, before pictures like this were uncovered, saying something like this would sound absolutely insane, right? And I'm sure it does to a lot of folks who are even listening now. Like, no, that can't be true, right? But no, it is true, and it's been proven. And kind of the response from the establishment is, well, there are secret societies who, they have weird old rituals, and it's just people having fun and playing around. But like, if it hadn't been uncovered, like, we wouldn't even know anything about that. And, there are conspiracy theories about groups that, may not actually exist per se, like the Illuminati, for example. The Illuminati obviously was a secret society back in the 18th century. I think it was actually founded in 1776, the same year as the United States was. Or, like conspiracy theories about Freemasons or things like that. Like, that's something that actually does exist. But, there are actual, like, influential political groups that get together in more official ways than even the Bohemian Grove Club, and actually affect policy in meaningful ways. So I'm talking about, the IMF, the World Bank, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group. Like, these are actual institutions that meet and try to determine what policies are for countries around the world. And the one that we're going to talk about today is the one that's been meeting for the past week, and that's the World Economic Forum. So we're going to spend today just talking about the World Economic Forum. We're going to look, at their own content, saying who they are and what they do and what their mission is. But again, the main point that I'd like to drive home from the beginning is that obviously we're going to be taking a critical view at what they say. And a lot of folks who are in the media establishment, or a lot of folks who are very privileged, are going to say, oh, this is just conspiracy theories. You're reading this the wrong way. Well, it's not really a conspiracy theory, because it's people who are actually meeting. They're actually doing conferences talking about how they actually want to change society, right? Like, they want to manipulate society for their own reasons. So again, it's not a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy fact. They are getting together and they are conspiring. And, you can label that differently, like they're, meeting for the betterment of mankind or whatever, but it is a conspiracy in the literal sense. They are actually meeting and actually conspiring to change policy. So with that, let's talk about, just from the onset, what a couple people have found most disturbing, or things that you may have heard about the World Economic Forum. One is the term the Great Reset. So this has been kind of spouted off a lot the past couple of years. You may have heard it in different scenarios. But after COVID, this is something that a lot of people heard of, called the Great Reset. And here's just a short video on their YouTube channel. Content, but I think that you guys kind of get the general gist of what they're trying to say there, right? They're saying There's all of these existential crises that the planet is facing, and that we need to get together under the banner of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset and work together to change the planet, right? But the question is, who is governing how that Great Reset happens, what gets reset, how, who benefits from it, and how that affects the daily lives of people like you and me. And something else that you may have heard of was a tweet that, it was for an article that came out when they said, welcome to 2030. I own nothing. I have no privacy, and life has never been better. So again, like, this is really the vision that they're trying to set for us, right? Is that in the future, we're not going to own anything. We're not going to have privacy, but our lives are going to be better. And obviously, folks should have some concerns, some legitimate concerns about what that means. And actually, I think if you actually click on this link, it's no longer active. Yeah. They don't even have that page up anymore. So again, this is just to say that we have to at least be cognizant of who these folks are, what their intentions are, why they would want to manipulate things certain ways, and again, what the net impact is going to be on people's lives. Because it's one thing to say, oh, the world is facing all these challenges, and we need to get together and work towards solutions. Okay, yes. Like, I would not dispute that. The world is faced with a lot of challenges right now. We're effectively on the verge of World War III, right? There's all kinds of different major existential challenges that the planet does face, that humanity does face. The question is, how do you address that? How do you solve that? And I think that the real solution is people from a working class background banding together, doing strikes, forming political parties, direct action where they're taking part in protests in the streets, and affecting policy on a global level in every country around the world. That is the ideal solution. The worst possible solution is that the people already in power, the people who have driven us to the brink of extinction, remarket what they're doing and what they have been doing in the status quo, and remarket that under the banner of something new and revolutionary. And the only things that do change are negative impacts to your life and mine, where our material wealth goes down, where we do have less, where we're more impoverished, where we have no privacy, where we're living in a corporate technocratic police state. That would be the worst way to try to solve the problems that the world is in, because that isn't solving the problem, right? That's just making the rich richer and the poor poorer, the powerful more powerful, and the disenfranchised more disenfranchised. So with that, let's just have an open mind. Let's hear out what the World Economic Forum is saying that they're doing, and let's give them a chance to explain themselves. So again, folks, if you want to submit some super chats during this, I'll be more than happy to address that at the end. But the first person that we need to look at here is Klaus Schwab. So I'm not sure if you folks have heard of him before, but he's effectively the founder of the World Economic Forum. So let's just read his biography. This is right from the World Economic Forum website. Professor Klaus Schwab was born in Ravensburg, Germany in 1938. He is founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, the international organization for public-private cooperation. He founded the forum in 1971, the same year which he published Modern Enterprise Management in Mechanical Engineering. In that book, he argued that the management of a modern enterprise must serve not only shareholders but all stakeholders to achieve long-term growth and prosperity. Schwab has championed the multi-stakeholder concept since the forum's inception, and it has become the world's foremost platform for public-private cooperation. And again, folks, I think that this is something that, sorry about that. It's important to kind of understand what a public-private cooperation is, right? Because that's something that we've heard a lot of over the years, and that's not people working together with the government or average people becoming more democratically involved. What that really means is influential people in political power working with, or even in a lot of cases, being captured by private corporations. And that really effectively is what this turns out to be. And it's worth remembering what Mussolini said, right? What did Mussolini say? He said that the real definition of fascism is corporatism. It's where the corporations and the state become the same entity. And unfortunately, that's what we've really seen with public-private partnerships, right? We've seen a return to mercenaries like Blackwater. We've seen private prisons. We've just seen the worst aspects of statism being managed by private corporations, and by private corporations being empowered via the state. So that's what's important to reflect on when we hear public-private partnership. It's not just, again, people being active in their community, or like small businesses working with the government and like being stakeholders in the government or whatever. It's really about the capture of the commons by the rich, by the powerful. So, sorry, where was I here? Schwab has championed the multi-stakeholder concept since the forum's inception and has become the world's foremost platform for public and private cooperation. Under his leadership, the forum has been a driver of reconciliation efforts in different parts of the world, acting as a catalyst of numerous collaborations and international initiatives. In 1998, with his wife Hilda, he created the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship, which seeks to identify, recognize, and disseminate initiatives in social entrepreneurship that have significantly improved people's lives and have the potential to be replicated on a global scale. The foundation supports a network of over 350 social entrepreneurs around the world. In 2004, with the financial contribution received as part of the Dan David Prize, he established the new foundation, the Forum for Young Global Leaders, for leaders under 40. 7 years later, in 2011, he created the Global Shapers community for potential leaders between the ages of 20 and 30. The purpose of the two foundations is to integrate young people as a strong voice for the future into global decision-making processes and to encourage their engagement in concrete projects that address social problems. Schwab has encouraged the establishment of communities providing global expertise and knowledge for problem solving. Among them is the network of Global Future Councils, the world's foremost interdisciplinary knowledge network dedicated to promoting innovative thinking on the future. Don't you love how it's just such marketing corporate terms? Among them is the network of Global Future Councils, the world's foremost interdisciplinary knowledge network dedicated for promoting innovative thinking on the future. What the fuck does that even mean? The forum employs over 700 people with its headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, and additional offices in New York, San Francisco, Beijing, and Tokyo. An engineer and economist by training, Professor Klaus Schwab holds doctorates in economics, summa cum laude, from the University of Freiburg in engineering, from Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, and a Master's of Public Administration from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. So he's an Ivy Leaguer too. In 1972, he became one of the youngest professors on the faculty of the University of Geneva. He has received numerous international and national honors. His latest books are The Fourth Industrial Revolution, a worldwide bestseller translated into 30 languages, and Shaping the Fourth Industrial Revolution. During the course of his wide-ranging career, Schwab has received numerous honors. He holds 17 honorary doctorates, the National Medals of Honor, including the Grand Cordon of the Order of the Rising Sun of Japan, the Grand Cross with Star of the National Order of Germany, and the Knight of the Legion d'Honneur of France. He was also knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, Knight Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George. Outside of his work, he has a broad range of academic, cultural, and public service interests. He is a regular swimmer, mountain walker, and an enthusiastic participant in the English ski marathon. Klaus and Hilda married in 1971. They have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. Okay, so that's Klaus Schwab. So what is the World Economic Forum? Again, this is right from their website. The World Economic Forum is the international organization of public-private cooperation. The forum engages the foremost political, business, cultural, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. Okay, so right there, right? It's a network of people who are in control of of politics, so government, businesses, culture, that's media, and other kinds of leaders, and they're shaping global, regional, and industry agendas, right? So like right there, right? Like that is a conspiracy. It is a conspiracy of the powerful to work together to benefit each other, to benefit the powerful at the and it has to be an expense, right? Like it has to be at the expense of the people of the world, and how they can capture more of our resources, more of the commons, and funnel that into their own pockets. It was established in 1971 as a not-for-profit foundation and is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. It is an independent, impartial, and not tied to any special interests. How can that fucking be? If you are comprised of the most powerful people in the world, of leaders across multiple different industries and different kinds of leaders from around the world, then by definition you are tied to special interests. You are an amalgam of special interests. You are the special interests. That's what you are. It's not like you're not tied to them. You are them. You are a composition of all of them. The forum strives in all its effort to demonstrate entrepreneurship in the global public interest while upholding the highest standards of governance. Moral and intellectual integrity is at the heart of everything it does. Of course it is. Our activities are shaped by a unique institutional culture founded on the stakeholder theory, which asserts that an organization is accountable to all parts of society. Now, again, it's important to think about how that can be applied differently. It's one thing to say that a corporation is accountable to all of the workers and to all of the communities that it impacts. It's another thing to say that that the workers and the community is accountable to the corporations and accountable to the state, right? So that's what often gets lost in like this this feel good kind of rhetoric, is that okay, well you can have people think it means this, but you could also say the inverse. You could also say that the disenfranchised are accountable to the powerful. The institution carefully blends and balances the best of many kinds of organizations, both from the public and private sectors, international organizations, and academic institutions. We believe that progress happens by bringing people from all walks of life who have the drive and influence to make positive changes. Read the latest annual report. Okay, so that's what they are, right? Here's their Here's a report. Our mission, committed to improving the state of the world. Our vision, to leverage our trusted status as the global platform for shaping the future of economic, social, and industry systems. Our values, independence, impartiality, integrity. Our motto, entrepreneurship is the global public interest. And they go into his story. Who we are. Board of Trustees and Managing Board. The Forum adheres to the highest governance standards. Its Board of Trustees, the Forum's top governing body, consists of global leaders from government, business, civil society, arts, and academia. The Forum's Managing Board, the main operational body, also reflects the best experiences from each of these sectors. So again, folks, I just want to make clear, this is a union of people who are at the top, people that have power, people that are influential, right? Billionaires and multimillionaires and powerful political figures. This is not like, it would be different if it was like a grassroots collaboration of people from around the world who are, just average people, like union leaders and community organizers and people that are not like tied to really powerful institutions. Again, this is really an assembly of the powerful institutions. So it's very different than how it markets itself. It's not like it's It's not like it's something, it's not even like the United Nations, right? Like the United Nations is a meeting of different countries from around the world. Sure, like a lot of countries are not that democratic, including the United States. And the representation there isn't necessarily reflective of, of the world necessarily. But in spirit, it's an assemblage of different countries, right? It's supposed to be like a democratic forum of the nations of the world. This isn't even that, right? This is like, it's almost like explicitly private, but like a corporatist model, right? Again, Mussolini said fascism is corporatism. It is where corporations and the state merge. This seems to be an organization guided by the principle of merging the state with private corporations, with the authority of the state, with the interest of the rich and the powerful, and really the special interests that they say they're not, with those special interests who hope to capture the state and again capture our natural resources, under the guise, of course, of saving the planet and all that. So we're going to spend some time now just going through some different videos that they've been putting out, so you don't have to just listen to me. We're actually going to hear from these folks. We're going to hear what they say, how they're marketing, what their goals are. I'll interject from time to time, but let's just start off with Klaus Schwab himself. And this is the opening remarks for they've been meeting again for like the past week or so. So this is the opening remarks at the beginning, and this is Klaus Schwab here, and we're going to hear his introduction to the forum.
Distinguished heads of governments, distinguished heads of states, of course, dear partners and friends of the World Economic Forum, a very cordial welcome to the annual meeting 2022 in the spring of Davos. We are very glad to be together again in person. And of course, we have a very rich program. The theme of our coming together is history at a turning point. Government policies, corporate strategies. We will focus the program mainly on 4 different areas. First, the war in Ukraine, the aggression on Ukraine.
Let's see if I can speed this up.
And I have the particular pleasure to welcome a very strong delegation from Ukraine among us, composed by members of the government, composed by members of the parliament, by the mayor of Kiev and his brother and other mayors, and of course also by the young generation. Can I ask all our participants from Ukraine to stand up and to give them a special welcome? This war is really a turning point of history, and it will reshape our political and our economic landscape in the coming years. But we also are at the tail end of the most serious health catastrophe of the last 100 years, COVID-19, and we have to reinforce our resilience against a new virus possibly, or other risks
Possibly.
we have on the global agenda.
You never know.
We also
Could be anything.
have to address urgently the issue
Who would
of
have any kind of insider
all
knowledge?
the other issues related to the preservation of nature. And finally, we look at the future of the global economy with great concerns. Too high inflation, too low growth, too many debts. But what is particularly worrisome...
Who created all that debt? Who created that inflation? Oh, right. It was the governments and the giant corporations. Who are you? You guys did. The people who are in the room right now are the ones who did it. They're creating solutions to problems that they created.
are the consequences, such as falling back of hundreds of millions of people again into poverty and possibly tens of millions of people dying of hunger. We have to be really concerned about those issues, and that's what we want to do here during this meeting. So how can Davos contribute to improving the state of the world? First, we know that all those challenges cannot be met by governments alone, by business alone, or by civil society alone. We need collaborative efforts. And the World Economic Forum here, Davos here, you here, I think it's the most impressive community for global cooperation. Second way of contributing to make this a better world is to look at all those issues in a holistic way. Political, economic, social, and ecological dimensions of every issue today are intertwined. So here we are, and you may ask, why do we have 400 sessions? It is to deal with all the aspects of our global system.
To control all aspects of everything on the planet.
And finally, when I looked at the short video, I was thinking, should we have an atmosphere of optimism or pessimism? I think we should be joyful and grateful that we can meet again here in person. It's so important because confidence can only be built by personal contact. But let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the states of the world. But two conditions are necessary. The first one is that we act all as stakeholders of larger communities, that we serve not our only self-interests, but we serve the community. That's what we call stakeholder responsibility. And second, that we collaborate. And this is the reason why you find many opportunities here during the meeting to engage into very action and impact-oriented initiatives to make progress related to specific issues on the global agenda. So I'm sure that we will have a very successful meeting by working together. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce the President of the Swiss Confederation, Ignacio Cassis. And I want to use this opportunity, Mr. President, to thank you for the great hospitality, for the cooperation we had with our host country since over 50 years to make this meeting possible in Davos. And I want to thank also the representatives of the canton of Graubünden and the authorities and the population of Davos. Thank you for your great hospitality here in this global village of Davos. Again, a very cordial welcome to all of you, but in addition, I should say at the end, and I spoke about the forum as a stakeholder community, I would like to, in addition to the political representatives, the forum is the International Organization for Public-Private Cooperation. So your presence, the heads of over 50 governments, the ministerial delegations, is so important. But I want to thank you also, our partners, our business partners. You have kept your loyalty to the forum, despite the fact that we couldn't meet for quite some time. And I want to greet also the representatives of our young generation, which we have here, of our social entrepreneurs. So it's really the best mix to make progress in dealing with the issues on the global agenda. And now, Mr. President, I invite you to take the floor and to give us your welcome address. Thank you.
Okay. So that was his introduction there. So again, you can go right to their website, and they actually have video from all of the different meetings that they've done. Rebuilding societal trust, future-proofing health systems, accelerating and reskilling revolution. Like, what does that even mean? Accelerating the reskilling revolution. The augmented manufacturing experience. Staying on course for nature action. Economic weaponry. Uses and effectiveness of sanctions. How about that, huh? So they're talking about sanctions here. What do they say here?
Chairman and Managing Director of Mullis & Company USA. And bringing up the far left-hand side, we have John Morrison, CEO of the Institute for Human Rights and Business, based in the UK. We're going to run this as a series of initial interventions from the panel up here. We're going to go back and forth. I will look for interventions from the floor. I've also got my laptop here, which will feed in questions from the outside, and we'll finish sharp on 45 minutes. So without further ado, can I ask First Deputy Prime Minister Syrydenko to give us your take on where we're at with the sanctions story in the Ukraine right now?
Okay. Thank you.
Before we get into this, let's just remember where we are, right? The economy in the West is collapsing. The inflation is at a 40-year high in the United States. I believe it's also at a historic high in Europe. The stock market has been crashing for about 4 or 5 weeks. Or sorry, it's been down for I believe 8 weeks, which is a record since 1923. So, that didn't happen in the Great Depression. That didn't happen in the 2008 collapse. It didn't happen in 2020 with COVID. There has not been a period since 1923 where the Dow has been down 8 weeks in a row. There are baby formula shortages. Diesel is at an all-time high, which is helping exacerbate the supply chain issues. Crypto has been crashing. The bonds market has been crashing. What's been happening in Russia? Oh, they've extended trade relationships with China, with India, with other countries. And the ruble is at a 4-year high versus the dollar and a 7-year high versus the euro. The sanctions are not working on Russia. They're punishing us in the West for the benefit of NATO propaganda. That's the real truth. Just before these jabronis get up here and start saying how, the sanctions are about to remove Putin from power and it's for the benefit of freedom and democracy against authoritarianism.
First, I would like to start my speech with words of thankful and to express my gratitude to all those countries, to all those people that support Ukraine during these dramatic times. So we're really gratitude for those one who support and put Ukrainian lives, know about the economic and political benefits from Russia, who puts Ukrainian life above the oil and gas from Russia. So we're really grateful for our partners and friends. So Russian full is...
If they were putting the Ukrainian lives ahead of their own economic benefit, then we would be negotiating with Russia. We'd be allowing China to be a mediator, which we stopped from doing, and threatened them with sanctions early on when they very early in this wanted to mediate the conflict because they had a relationship with Russia, with Ukraine, and with NATO countries. But we didn't want that. And we have been standing in the way of any kind of negotiations and peace talks. And in fact, we've been funding and arming Ukraine and enriching Raytheon and Boeing in the process, so that more Ukrainians end up dying, more Russians and more Ukrainians end up dying, more civilians in the Donbass. So, and we've been arming Ukrainian Nazis for the past 8 years, right? They've been shelling the Donbass for 8 years. Even Amnesty International did a report back in 2014 saying that the ADAR Battalion, which is very similar to Azov, it's another neo-Nazi group, or just Nazi, not even neo-Nazi. The ADAR Battalion had been attacking civilians in the Donbass and Luhansk for years. And going back to 2014, again, there was a report Amnesty put out saying they are committing war crimes against the civilian population here. So again, if we wanted if we cared about actual Ukrainian lives, we would not be funding a proxy war. We would not be pushing them into this war. We would not have done a coup back in 2013 and 2014. We don't care about their lives. This is about enriching the West. This is about leveraging Ukraine as the most corrupt country on earth to launder money, to launder tens of billions of dollars. So they don't give a shit about Ukrainian lives, and they don't give a shit about your or my lives. This is all about enriching themselves and making themselves more powerful.
Scale invasion to Ukraine, I think, put the world on edge. And now there is no time and no room for a neutral position, no time and room for a weak decision, as this war affects every country. So actually Russia uses its leverage like a weapon. I mean, food, energy, resources. Now it's...
Did Russia sanction the West? No? No, we sanctioned them. So how the fuck are they using those things as a weapon when we're the one who are weaponizing it? We're sanctioning them. We are making those things a weapon. What are you talking about?
Treat the world with a world hunger. So that's why I think the action are intentional.
We sanctioned them! What are you talking about? They didn't threaten us. They're not trying to withhold food. We are withholding food by sanctioning them. We are the ones doing that. Let's start off this conversation about sanctions by not even understanding what a fucking sanction is.
And sanction against Russia, there should be reaction on its weaponizing of everything. In general, economic sanction used in the modern world like tools of pressure. And in 2014, our partners, they applied sanction against Russia, but now we understand that it was not successfully and fully enough. That's for sure. So the current situation is totally different. So Russia wants to destroy Ukraine. So obviously they kill people, they kill children, they destroy the economy, and they frighten the world with a world hunger that might appear. So
it's because of our sanctions. The sanctions that you're advocating for are creating the problems that you're trying to posit a solution to. She's saying that sanctions can be a solution to the world hunger that's created by the sanctions. Like, this is what kind of backwards double-think bullshit that this WEF represents overall, right? They're creating policies, and they're saying, by following the policy that created this problem, even more so, by extending the influence of this policy, by empowering this policy more so, we can solve the problem that was created by the policy itself. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
That's why there is definitely no time for cost and benefit analysis. So we just need to cut Russia from the civilized world entirely. This is our main message that I would like to speak about. And we appreciate the sanction that was applied by our partners, but let's look at the number. Let's look at the situation in general. So if you look at the forecast of Russian economy, you will look at that according to consensus analysis, the Russian economy is going to be, I think, shrink by 10% of GDP till the year. So, but if you compare it with situation in Ukraine, because it's also, we have military front and we have economic front right now. And if you look at our forecast, I think the economy of Ukraine will be shrink by at least 30% of GDP till the end of the year. So that's why it means that we need your support more, and we need more full-scale sanction against Russia. Because economic front is not least front, and army wins battles, but economy wins wars. That's why we need your fully economic support to win.
If that's the case, Russia's definitely winning this war, because, again, their currency is at a 4-year high versus the dollar. Meanwhile, every time I go to the gas pump, it costs me 20 cents more per gallon. So if we're gauging the success of the war on economics, Russia, I'm sure, is winning, because shit sucks over here in the West.
In this war. So I think that together we need more support for Ukraine and more sanction against Russia. So even right now in Davos, when we don't have Russian delegation, and I think that they should not be the part of global conversation, and they should not be the part of global economy. And I think that it's time to unite the world. And I think I also would like to mention, China and India as well. They also provide sanction against Russia.
What kind of fantasy world are you living in? We're threatening China. We're pushing Russia and China closer together. We're pushing Russia and India and China and India closer together. India is supposed to be part of the Quad to like offset Chinese power. All that we've done is push them. We're pushing these countries. We're pushing Eurasia and East Asia in 1984 terms. We're pushing them closer together. So what kind of fantasy world are you living in where you think that you're going to have China sanctioning Russia? That's completely absurd. China should be mediating this conflict and providing the world with a way out of this conflict, a way out of nuclear war. China could play a historic role in human history by helping us out of a potential nuclear war. But what are we doing? Joe Biden's going to Japan and threatening China over Taiwan.
The economic front actually even more complicated than the military front. For example, there are huge efforts is made by our partners to provide the sixth package of sanctions against Russia on oil and gas. But in parallel, there are some European companies that are opening account for paying for Russian gas. So that's why Russia capitalized in this case. Russia capitalized right now even on food crisis. Our Black Sea ports are fully blocked, and that's why it's also another message I would like to send to you. We need your help to
we need peace talks to end the conflict. You want to continue. You want to continue on a war. You want to continue shelling civilians in the Donbass and prosecuting a war against Donetsk and Luhansk, which are declaring themselves as independent. You want to not acknowledge their sovereignty and repress those people, but you feel entitled to, to Russia not prosecuting a war on the other side. It's a complete double standard, right? It's all about U.S. hegemony. It's all about, the corporate police state hegemony against any kind of resistance that they may face anywhere in the planet, whether that's in Syria or Iraq or Libya or Cuba or Donetsk and Luhansk.
Block the seaports.
Mines.
Yes, because even right now, Russia capitalized on food, and the price for wheat even higher than what was in the previous years. So it means that it's a paradox that should be fixed. It means that sanction is not good enough. It's paradox.
The sanctions are not working, is what you mean to say.
But we can fix it together with you. Last and not the least, many companies announced that they leave Russian markets. There was many press releases for this company, but the real situation is following. So they announced, but they still operating on Russian market. And they have time to adopt to this sanction. That's why it means that we should think about the secondary sanction, how we can block it, to block any circumventions. So that's why I think the government should be more proactive in increasing, in enlarging sanction against Russia. I mean, secondary sanction and the ordinary sanction. And the final remarks I would like to speak about it, of course, frozen Russian assets. It's time for Ukraine right now to think about recovery plan. Early recovery and post-war recovery. We have these frozen assets all around the world, and we need to find a clear procedure and create a solution how to send this money for these frozen assets on the reconstruction of Ukraine.
How to use frozen Russian assets and launder that money for the benefit of Western companies nominally in the name of Ukraine. That's what that means. That means stealing Russian money and laundering it via reconstruction of Ukraine back into the hands of Western oligarchs.
And that's why I think it's also another item I would like to raise during this discussion and listen to your ideas and think how we can together fight against this invasion, as we understand that it's real full-scale war. It's not a conflict, and it influences all countries. That's why I think that to solve this problem, we can just all together by more supporting Ukraine economic front of Ukraine and by increasing sanctions against Russia.
Thank you so much.
Do you guys realize how much worse the economy is going to get as these sanctions go on and as they pile on more sanctions? They are completely disrupting the global economy that they set this global economy up over our lives, right? Where every corporation is part of this global economy, every bank is, and now they are fucking up the global economy with this war and with with the sanctions themselves, and they are just making things worse and worse. Again, every time I go to the gas pump, it's more money every single time. I'm not even paying a gas tax in my state anymore, and it's still going up and up. It's at an all-time high here. Like, what are we looking at? We're looking at $10 gas, $10 gallon gas, $15 gallon gas. We already have a baby formula shortage. Like, is it just we're gonna go to the grocery stores and not have food? Are there gonna be no bread on the shelves? Like, what are we really looking at here? They don't seem to care about that. All they care about is prosecuting a war against Russia, extending Western hegemony, and again, laundering money. Laundering stolen Russian money, but laundering U.S. taxpayer money and other countries' money through Ukraine back into their own pockets, back into the pockets of Raytheon.
That phrase, it's not a conflict, it's a real full-scale war, is going to resonate with me. And it would be great to get your response. America has been leading on the sanctions charge, and to get the view from Congress is invaluable at this stage.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Wonderful to be with the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economics in Ukraine, with my distinguished colleagues. I had the pleasure of serving with Eric Cantor for a number of years. And most of all, welcome and thanks to all of you who got up bright and early to be here. I went on a delegate. I serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, number 2 ranking Republican, and on the House Financial Services Committee. So we've had a lot of integration, especially vis-a-vis OFAC and others in terms of imposing sanctions. It was one of the very first delegations 5 days into the war that went to Poland and to the border of Ukraine with colleagues on a bipartisan basis, speaking as one America. And I'm part of a delegation now that just left Moldova.
Which again just speaks to how the U.S. is not a democratic country, because I'm sure 1 out of 10 people at least would say that they have some issues about the handling of the Ukraine crisis. Is there, it's 10% representation in Congress for that opinion? No, of course not.
Okay, and I'm here, and then on to 2 other stops. And this is a very top issue here. And I can tell you, sanctions, I believe, are a critical tool in restraining the ambitious and...
I wonder what kind of defense stocks she's invested in. Do we know?
...destructive impulses of adversary states. They're very difficult to craft and to implement, let me just say, and using our economic tools effectively require a very clear, I think, and consistent message, ironclad commitment to long-term implementation, and an exhaustive attention to detail. Oh, I'm going to lose all my pages here. To detail. But that just because they're difficult does not mean
it's a fucking cartoon,
that,
people.
We should not try. For example, genocide, nuclear proliferation.
The genocide that the Nazis that we've been funding have been waging against ethnic Russians for the past 8 years. Is that the genocide you're talking about? The nuclear proliferation that we are pushing for? The nuclear war that we're setting ourselves on the verge of by prosecuting this war, this proxy war against Russia? Is that what you're concerned about?
Or invading a sovereign state or country.
The sovereign state of Luhansk, the People's Republic of Luhansk, and the People's Republic of Donetsk? Those sovereign countries? Do you care about the sovereignty of those people? The sovereignty of Crimea? No, you don't give a shit about that sovereignty, do you?
Without reason or provocation, are egregious
nor the sovereignty of Ukraine back in 2013 when Chris Murphy and John McCain were participating in Nazi rallies against the government to remove the democratically elected government of Ukraine, the democratically elected president who won an election in 2010. Chris Murphy was there with John McCain participating in a rally with people with blood and soil Nazi flags against the government to illegally remove that elected government from power. Yet Chris Murphy has a problem with the January 6th protesters when he took part in a January 6th in Ukraine. This is just, it's such fucking bullshit. It's such propaganda. And again, the whole reason that they're in favor of this is to extend their own power, make them enrich themselves, steal money from Russia via sanctions, via frozen assets, and to launder money through Ukraine and to kill tons of Ukrainians in the process.
Fronts to the international order, and it is appropriate and it is right that states should work together to impose costs on those who would commit such crimes. Our post-war international system, which is founded on the rule of law and respect.
Oh, is it? Is it founded on the rule of law for the million Iraqis who died, who we murdered in Iraq on a lie? Is the rule of law for the people of Libya or the people of Syria or the people of Yemen, for all the Yemeni kids who we droned, for the American citizens who we've murdered in foreign countries with drones? Is it based on the rule of law in Israel, where there's an apartheid state that murders Palestinians and murdered a Palestinian American journalist and then attacked her funeral? That doesn't seem like it's based on laws at all. It seems like it's based on oligarchs in the West who completely control every aspect of our society and get together in fucking Davos every year to talk about how they have to conspire about how they can control our lives even more.
For universal human rights benefits all of us, I think, but it requires active defense. Economics.
Palestine. What about their human rights? Do you give a shit about Palestinian human rights? No. Stand with Israel, right? Stand with Israel as they drop bombs on press buildings.
Sanctions are an essential part of our efforts to safeguard international security. I should say the sanctions must be used to bring about a positive change in behavior. I believe that they are a tactic, not a strategy. And I will say that sanctions against Russia,
I'll be right back,
on the part of the United States of America and others, I wish that our administration had worked sooner. We saw the buildup of 190,000 troops on the border. I believe they could have been used to perhaps stop the aggression, the invasion, the now full-on war that we are seeing in Ukraine now. So, fine that they're in place now. We should unify together, but I believe they should have been started much, much earlier. And I'd like to focus a little bit on the oligarchs, and you talked a little bit about the assets. And not enough has been done to impose pain, I don't believe, on Russia's elite. They are fully complicit in Russia's regime, and Western countries should coordinate to maximize the economic pressure on oligarchs and their families. The United States House of Representatives in Congress has passed legislation that the U.S., for them to be able to seize, seize, not just freeze, but to seize those assets and use the proceeds to support everything from humanitarian assistance for Ukraine to military support also. So, and it's in time, we hope, the rebuilding. The Russian elite must understand that continued support for Putin is no longer in their interest. Next, I think we have to work together to end Europe's reliance on Russia, to enable tougher sanctions. I called for a U.S. ban on Russian energy imports for months. And I believe this was an extremely important move to demonstrate to our partners that we have the will to follow through on economic sanctions on Russia in the long term. And now we need to accelerate Europe's efforts to transition away from Russian energy. They still have massive dependence on Russian energy, and we should be working overtime to help our partners open up new sources. And I would hope that the United States of America could be very much a part of that in terms of unleashing our American energy supply and independence. I believe we're the Saudi Arabia of LNG, and we should be selling it to Europe. It's 41% cleaner, and these are the kinds of sources that I think are very important, and it'd be a cut off a very important revenue source for Putin. We've got to make the sanctions airtight and impose tough penalties. And secondary sanctions, I do believe, are now in order. So those that aid the Russian effort by circumventing these sanctions, we must work in close coordination with our partners and allies to identify and punish the sanction evaders. And that is what I'm talking about now. And they should also be fully, not partially, cut off from SWIFT. Last, I would say that we must set up the political pressure on Russia also, and the U.S. and our allies have levied punishing sanctions, but I would say they are costing an immense cost to Moscow, but there need to be diplomatic costs as well. And that means leaving Russian officials and government literally from the outside looking in. I just passed a piece of legislation through the U.S. House of Representatives. I hope that it will be moving swiftly through the Senate, which is called the Isolate Russian Government Officials Act, that would bar their attendance from the G20, the Bank of International Settlements, the Basel Committee for Banking Standards, the Financial Stability Board, the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, and the International Organization of Securities Commissions. I think that benefiting from these international and participating in these organizations, including the ones in my bill, calls for a basic level of commitment to our international order, and unleashing and launching this illegal.
All right, guys, you get the point of this. You get the gist of it. I think we got it. All right, so let's look at some other. Conferences, meetings that they're having. That was economic warfare. The future of globalization. It's a fun topic as always. Energy outlook. A generation of progress lost achieving gender equality. China investment and economic outlook. Responding to humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Strategic outlook. Eurasia. Prioritizing mental health. Unlocking the social economy. Oh yeah, and Zelensky also spoke. I don't know if you guys saw this. This was a piece of news. Zelensky actually addressed them also.
Pleasure to welcome to
The
this
volume's really uneven on these, huh?
Volodymyr Zelensky, the president.
Isn't how to pronounce his name? Vladimir.
Tomorrow marks 3 months when, on the 24th of February, Russia began an unprovoked and unnecessary war against Ukraine. An act which has cost.
We started the war in 2013.
And has caused 6 million Ukrainians to seek refuge abroad.
Sorry, I know this is quiet. Let me try to adjust the volume here.
Every country has the right.
I'm assuming this is low for you guys. I'm gonna try to raise it. But
determine its
hopefully
own means of
hope it's not too loud. Sorry.
and choose
I can't hear like what the volume is for you guys.
it wants to have. Every country's
Wow, holy
territorial
crap.
integrity and
Some big super chats.
sovereignty must be respected.
I'm hold on a second. Before I listen to Zelensky, let me just let me take a list. Let me make sure I don't miss any of these. I'm gonna take a break for a second to read some of these super chats, just because I don't want to miss it. Thanks, Montclair. Jeez, that was a big super chat. Thank you. Where's the pop out thing? I've missed some before, so I want to make sure I'm not missing them. I don't know if they disappear or something. Thanks again, Montclair. That was very generous. Montclair says, well, I don't agree with you on everything. I do appreciate you. My question is, given the choice of Trump, DeSantis, and Biden, who would get your vote and why? Again, I probably wouldn't vote for any of those people. Like, they're just policies where, like, they don't really diverge, right? Like, again, like, if you look at Palestine, for example, like, what kind of divergence in opinion is there on Palestine? So, you know, let's see, a billionaire. I don't really know what DeSantis's history is. But, like, they all, like, kind of embody, like, the same kind of, you know, establishment, really, like, fundamentally. But I really do appreciate the big super chat. Thank you. It's very kind of you. Auntie Ann says their goal is to siphon all of the money up to them and impose an austerity, subsistency economy for all but the wealthy. That's how they plan on ending inequality. only amongst the classes, not between them. Makes sense? Sparky says, some elites may believe their own propaganda, probably. Putin is an anti-globalist hero. Well, you know, it's worth mentioning, I didn't mention it here, he was actually like a young leader of the World Economic Forum. Like there's pictures of him and Klaus Schwab together. I don't know if something changed. You know, obviously there's a strong anti-Russian sentiment at this year's, but it's worth just remembering that. And you also said F Ukraine. Hope that doesn't get me removed off here. So again, sorry if I'm missing some. It seems like I don't know if I see all of them, but thank you all for watching. Again, thank you, Montclair. I really do appreciate the $100. That's my biggest super chat yet. So thank you. All right. I'm going to continue on with this, and we're going to hear from Zelensky now. Hopefully this isn't, and I'm sorry again about the volume. Hope this isn't too loud.
The President of Switzerland has shown us of international law and the post-war war.
Or too quiet.
World War II order. Mr. President, now on the first official day of the World Economic Forum annual meeting 2022, we convene.
It's quiet for me. Can you guys just tell me in the chat, like, is it too loud or too quiet?
Geopolitical and
Haspel and Pompeo constantly misled Trump. Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Mr. President,
I will, sorry. I don't mean to keep going back and forth here. Yes, I agree with that, Sparky. And I do think that Trump was misled by his own administration repeatedly. However, again, like, what is the divergence on Ukraine? All right, so it's too quiet still. All right, I'm going to up the volume a little bit more.
we have all seen the leadership, your courageous leadership. We are eager to hear from you on what lies ahead for your country and its people, your vision for peace in Europe and the international global order, and how we can assist you, because everybody of us is affected by what's happening in your country. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
How's the volume now, guys? How's that volume?
Mr. Chairman, Professor Schwab, President Cassis, ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful for the opportunity to take part in the discussions at the forum. The main theme for this year's Davos is history at a turning point, government policies and business strategies. This year, the words turning point appears to become more than just a rhetoric figure of speech. This is really the moment when it is decided whether brute force will rule the world. If so, the force is not interested in our thoughts, and there is no need for further meetings in Davos, as there would be no reason for that. Brute force seeks nothing but the subjugation of those it seeks to subdue, and it does not discuss, but kills at once. And Russia does that in Ukraine just as we speak today. By the way, look at the building of the former Russian house in Davos. It has been turned into a house of Russian war crimes. And this is an example of their transformation, that what Russia has done to itself by becoming a state of war criminals, and what it brings to the world. It inspires.
This man governs over a military with Nazi battalions in it, the Azov battalion, the Adar battalion, and he also has criminalized 12 different, well, he's criminalized 11, but since the coup in 2014, 12 different political parties have been deemed illegal. So, you know, put everything in context here.
requires other potential aggressors to act. Instead of successful, peaceful cities, there's only black ruins. Instead of normal trade, sea full of mines and blocked ports in Ukraine. Instead of tourism, closed skies and...
Maybe we should negotiate peace. Maybe we should have some peace talks. Maybe recognize Donetsk and Luhansk as independent countries since we're honoring people's sovereignty. Maybe disarm and disband the Azov battalion and the Adar battalion.
Thousands of Russian bombs and cruise missiles. This is what the world would like if that turning moment would not have a proper response from the humanity. It would resemble a large set of war crimes. So history remembers many moments when everything changed dramatically. For example, how several shots fired could kill millions of people. If those shots were fired on June 28, 1914 in Sarajevo, history remembers how much grief one person can do if it can see, it can understand that it's not been properly resisted, as it was, for example, in 1938 in Munich. Some historical...
Did you resist the Azov battalion and the Adar battalion? Did you try to disarm them, try to remove them from Ukraine's military? Did you try to stop the shelling of the Donbass?
Twists and turns were noticeable, some not, but we always had to respond to them.
Did you declare neutrality and say that Ukraine would not be joining NATO and not be seeking nuclear weapons? Or did you say that you wanted Ukraine to join NATO and that you wanted nuclear weapons?
Trying to prepare for other historical upheavals so as to mitigate the possible consequences, or trying to heal the wounds out of catastrophes that followed one or another historical twist. And now we have a large collection of such responses. There's UN Charter with all these agencies, the OSCE, the IAEA, the WTO, and many other institutions. But are there enough of them to respond to what we have faced today? But is it possible now to try to adapt those institutions for modern challenges? Definitely not. We need to change the approach, not to respond, but to act preventively. And not only to adapt to new realities, what we have, but to create new tools, new precedents. Look at what Ukraine has already done. We have established a historical precedent for courage. We didn't listen to those who said that our defense would not hold longer than just a couple of days. We have stopped the Russian army, which was called the second largest in the world, at the cost of heavy fighting, at the cost of thousands of lives. We are gradually pushing the occupiers out of our territories. But would we have to do that?
That's not what happened. Russia strategically moved its forces around. They attacked Kiev at first to distract the Ukrainian military as they took the Donbass. That's clearly what happened, and you can look at the ground of what's happening now in the Donbass. Ukrainian troops are being encircled currently.
We were hard last year, and a full range of sanctions would be applied against Russia, preventively, that would knock down any aggressor. I'm sure the answer is no. Preventing war could be guaranteed should the sanctions of the world would be preventive and not just imposed as the response. Ukraine has set another precedent in the 3 months, a precedent for the unseen unity of the democratic world around the emotions of genuine admiration for Ukrainians' courage and around the understanding that you would need to fight for the freedom. And now hundreds of millions of citizens in democratic countries are putting pressure on governments and companies to make sure they would limit or restrain their relations with the aggressor state, with Russia. and instead to help the people who was under attack. But this is happening only now, even though Russia started its war against Ukraine back in 2014.
They didn't start the fucking war. They did not start the war. They did not launch a coup in Ukraine. The United States did a coup against Ukraine's democratically elected government. The government of Ukraine, the president of Ukraine, was elected in 2010 in a free and fair election. The West funded and participated in and backed a coup in 2013 and 2014 that removed that government from power. Again, Chris Murphy, John McCain, they took part in effectively the January 6th in Ukraine, except for it was actually a coup. It was actually an insurrection, and it actually removed the government from power. That's what started this war. That is what started this war. It started in late 2013. Russia is reacting now to 8 years of people in the Donbass being shelled. And Ukraine saying that they wanted to join NATO and get nuclear weapons.
We are grateful for this support, but if that happened back then, immediately, that unity, that pressure on governments, on companies for the stake of the fight for the freedom, would Russia start this full-scale war? Would it bring all these losses upon Ukraine and upon the world? I'm sure that the answer to this question is also no. Now we see that the world listens and believes Ukraine, but there's also a certain expectations of the world as to how the situation will be resolved, what tools will work, what new can we create to prevent such aggressions in future, and how do we stop the brute force that has challenged everything that we all cherish and value. That's what the turning point means. Ladies and gentlemen, don't expect for the fatal shots being fired. Don't expect for Russia using their special weapons, either chemical, biological, and even more so nuclear. Do not give the aggressor the impression that the world would not resist enough. Protect the freedom. And
this guy doesn't give a shit about starting World War III, does he? Like, he's repeatedly called for a no-fly zone, and he's calling to responding to the use of nuclear weapons. Like, does he not, like, you know, even if, like, the United States was under attack, I don't think that a solution that should be advocated by an American in that situation is, let's have a global nuclear war where everybody on the planet dies, right? Like, that's not moral, even if your country is under attack. Like, that is effectively what he is pushing for. He's pushing for World War III because Russia is attacking Ukraine, or Russia is responding to what's happening in Ukraine. Like, that I don't see how that's a moral position to say, okay, well, because my country is in a war right now, and there are people dying in my country, let's have a global nuclear war where billions of people die. Is that really a good solution? How about a solution is you declare neutrality and disarm your Nazi battalions? That seems a little more reasonable than let's have a fucking nuclear war.
Angular, peaceful order in the world with the maximum efforts possible. This is what the sanctions should be. There should be maximum, so that Russia and every other potential aggressor who wants to wage a brutal war against its neighbor would clearly know the immediate consequences for their actions. And I believe there's still no such sanctions against Russia. And there should be. There should be Russian oil embargo. All the Russian banks should be blocked. No exceptions. There should be an abandonment of the Russian IT sector. There should not be any trade with Russia. This should be
among NATO Western countries. Like, again, like, we're talking about a minority of the world. We're talking about Europe, the United States, Canada, Japan, and Australia, who effectively, like, it's NATO and those other countries who are effectively on board with the sanctions against Russia. And even some NATO countries are. Turkey's not really on board all the way with the sanctions, nor extending NATO and adding Sweden and Finland. But again, Russia is just trading with the rest of the world. They're trading with China. They're trading with India. They're trading with Pakistan. They're trading with Brazil. They're trading with a lot of African countries, a lot of Latin American countries, a lot of Asian countries. They're just trading with the other countries who aren't under the thumb of U.S. hegemony, completely under the thumb. So again, like, you can extend the sanctions, but it's not going to hurt Russia. It's only going to hurt people in the countries who are sanctioning Russia.
Precedent for sanctions pressure that will work convincingly for the decades to come and would support the peace. It is necessary to set a precedent for the complete withdrawal of all foreign businesses from Russian market, so that your brands would not be associated with war crimes, so that your offices, bills and goods were not used by the war criminals in their bloody interests. Values must matter, particularly when a full-scale war begins and the global markets are becoming destabilized, because someone there is simply neglecting the values. In that case, everyone suffers losses. We offer every company that leaves the Russian market to continue operating in Ukraine. You'll have access not only to our market of 40 million consumers, but also to the common market of Europe. And your brands, your positions, they will only increase because you would truly support the protection of freedom. Our representatives here in Davos can inform all of you on the details of the prospects that Ukraine opens for your businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, we offer the world to set a precedent for rebuilding the country after the war, which will show everyone who dreams of destroying the life of a neighbor that the war is not working. I invite you to take part in this rebuilding. The amount of work is enormous. We have more than $500 billion in losses. Tens of thousands of facilities were destroyed. We need to rebuild entire cities and industries. And we offer a special, historically significant model of rebuilding when each of the partner countries or partner cities or even partner companies will have the opportunity to take patronage over a particular region of Ukraine. It could be a city or community or even an industry. Britain, Denmark, the European Union and other leading international entities have already chosen a specific area for patronage in rebuilding. And thanks to this model of relations, the post-war rebuilding could be fast, could be efficient, and could be of high quality. And this would not only allow to attract the best specialists, architects, engineers, builders, developers, managers, and others, but it will also be the largest in Europe since the World War II. It will become the largest opportunity for an economic way forward, and I hope that at the beginning of the international conference in Lugano that was mentioned by the President Kassis, it will be held in July this year, dedicated to the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. All of our partner countries and most of the leading companies of the world will come up with their own packages of proposals. And taking this opportunity, I would like to extend words of gratitude to Switzerland for organizing this conference and supporting our efforts. I would like to note the efforts of Ursula von der Leyen, particularly her proposal to establish a platform for rebuilding and reconstruction.
All right, let's skip a little bit.
But now, the world simply has no tool like that, and we propose to for
I think he takes questions in here or something.
Still two questions.
Let's go back to Klaus.
Thank you, President Zelensky. You have shown us the magnitude and the complexity of the issue and what is actually at stake. Mr. President, if I may
hundreds of billions of dollars being laundered through Ukraine. That's what's at stake.
Still two questions. The first one is the following. What is your dream? How do you see
What is your dream? What is your dream?
Ukraine in the future? What is your vision for Ukraine?
Why is he writing this down? What is he writing down? What is he writing down? What is your dream? Why do you need to write down what is your dream? What do you have to write down from that?
Thank you for this question.
Puppy dogs and butterflies.
Complex, yet simple one, a philosophical one, and very specific one. Just to be frank, I'm myself being the president of a state at war. We already are thinking what is the Ukraine of today. Because every morning starts for me with getting the number of people who were killed in the past 24 hours. Unfortunately, according to the statistics, we've got 87 dead bodies, 87 victims today in Yasna, nearby Chernihiv, just today. So
That's really sad. I think maybe we should have some peace talks.
the future of Ukraine will be there, but without them. I would hate going into emotions deeply at this point, but I can tell you that
What does the
our
body language mean when
country
you're like
is
grabbing your own
losing
arm
a
like
lot
that?
today, every day. But it makes us stronger. We have to pay dearly for the freedom. We wage this people's fight for the nation, for its future, and definitely the victory is awaiting us ahead. I'm sure we will be a victorious state with unified people, unified by this victory. I'm really glad that we've resulted to be that strong. And I mean, the civilians, the military, we will be a strong nation with specific security priorities. As we do understand that with a neighbor like this, anything can happen anytime, and the war may repeat itself. We have to make it in a way, we have to create such conditions that people or businesses would not be afraid to exist in this country, to thrive in this country. Just to take an example of Israel. Speaking just of territory, this is a smaller state. This is not about historical importance, just geographically. Ukraine is a bit bigger than that in Europe, and the task of defending our land is more complex. And the task is to
Defending your land against Donetsk and Luhansk who want to be independent, like Israel's defending its land against Palestinians who want to be independent.
create the most up-to-date defense system, to create the most modern multimodal defense and security system, to enter into cooperative defense agreements with the countries we respect and we have trust in, and hopefully these documents will be approved by the parliaments of our partner nations, to see that any chance for the aggressor to try enter our country in the future will be short-lived. Again, the future of this country is about people and businesses, about development of digitalization. We are not going to dwell into corrupt deeds or oligarchic institutions.
You already are. You already are. You're making dissident parties illegal.
Nothing in that will remain in Ukraine. Actually, there is nothing like this already in Ukraine. And I think
No, Ukraine is not corrupt at all. God forbid anybody suggests that. No, Burisma doesn't exist. That's not an actual thing.
it's modern. This
Who's Hunter Biden?
nation. This nation which is appealing to them, to the rest of the world. This is my dream of Ukraine. Thank you.
Stand up, you idiots! Stand up! Oh my God, these unpatriotic Putin puppets refuse to stand for the leader of freedom and democracy.
A substantial role in feeding the world, if I may say so, and your exports at the moment of food products are interrupted. How can we help to restore Ukraine as a major, to fulfill its function, to be a major contributor in order to avoid a food crisis which would be so dangerous for all of us in the world and so painful? What can we do, and what can you do? What can we do for you?
You know, lots of steps it might entail. Best if these are in and around the country, which is happening at the moment to the larger extent. The priority matter is to deblocate our seaports. You know of our seaports being blockaded. The whole of the Azov Sea, most of the Black Sea. This has been done by the Russian Federation. And you probably know that they are stealing our grain on a daily basis. The Russian military are doing this, smuggling them by ships to other countries. And we need to react promptly on that. Our Minister of External Affairs is actively working with the peers and services in other countries. And actually, it's a tricky question itself, how you as a country can buy grains that you know for sure have been smuggled by Russians from Ukraine. So we work in this direction along diplomatic channels, and other countries have been assisting us on that because we won't be able to fight these Russian Federation's actions all alone. So another point is how to deblocate our ports, seaports. The European Union is engaged. I've talked to Boris Johnson, to Andrzej Duda from Poland, to Turkey, to Switzerland. We talked to the United Nations, asking for substantial, real steps towards establishing a corridor which would allow exports of our wheat, sunflower, and other grains, because otherwise there will be a deficit, and you know it will happen everywhere, in Asia, in Africa, everywhere.
Mr. President, you have shown the situation in your country and how much our future depends on bringing a solution to the terrible fight you are engaged in against your will. Now, you have here, Mr. President, in the hall, more than 1,000 leaders from politics and business. If you had a personal wish to each of those leaders, and if you would address each of those leaders, what would be your message to conclude our session today?
I need $1 trillion to keep Ukraine running by tomorrow.
Your personal message.
It's like 1984, isn't it? Big Brother.
To each one, 1,000 of them. I'm not sure I would have enough time. I'm really short on time. So I would rather say that, you know, Ukraine is short on time. No.
We need money by tomorrow. Wire me money right now.
How much time does Europe or the world has And because of that, I wouldn't speak personally to anyone specific, particular, because I think the world has to be united. United by this threat, by this war unleashed by the Russian Federation. The world is united already now, and I am thankful.
No, it's not.
To the
No,
world
it's not. NATO, Japan, Australia, South Korea. That's what's united. The world is not united. The world is very divided. Half of Africa stands with Russia, half of Latin America, most of Asia, they're all standing with Russia, or at least not wanting them kicked out of the UN Security Council or Human Rights Council.
This, I would only wish you not to lose this feel of unity. This creates this punch that the management of the Russian Federation fears the most. And, well,
yes, they are terrified of NATO countries hurting themselves with sanctions. Russia is so terrified about gas prices going up in the U.S. and people not being able to heat their homes in Europe. That's what's really terrifying Vladimir Putin right now.
I do understand and know that each of you esteemed world leaders have your own range of priorities and issues, and each of you has a country to look after and think about. But I'm also thinking that we risk losing those values, the ones that we are fighting not to lose in Ukraine. I would wish that every one of you wakes up in the morning with this feeling in the head, like, what have I done for Ukraine today? Thank you.
Stand up, you Putin puppets! Stand up! Look at these fucking Putin puppets. Did you just see that? Did you just see those Putin puppets leaving? Look at these fucking assholes. Right here, you see these two idiots right in the middle? They are leaving while the leader of the free world is addressing us, asking for funds to keep Ukraine going. And these two assholes are sneaking out. Fucking commie Putin puppets. There they go. Who are those two people? We need them doxxed, and we need them kicked off of social media, debanked.
I can conclude this session.
Look, here's some more Putin puppets.
By saying, we are all united with you. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking on our behalf, Klaus. Oh my God. All right, guys. I know we're spending too much time on these. Gregory W. I thought it said George W. Meeks. Gregory W. Meeks. The View from Capitol Hill. I don't want to listen to that. Discussion with the Klitschkos. Huh. The boxers? Averting a global food crisis. Safeguarding global scientific collaboration. Russia? What's next? Ian Bremmer. See what I'm saying? Like, there's just so many of these things that, like, it would take days to go through them all. Like, because they're happening at the same time, right? This was we're on the first day still. This was Monday. This was all at 1 p.m. on Monday. They had 5 different conferences at once. So again, that just gets back to my original point. Like, this is how extensive like their plans are for global domination. Like how much they want to control every aspect of society. At a 1 p.m. on a Monday, they're talking about food, science, Russia, tourism and travel, and CO2, carbon dioxide removal. That's just 1 o'clock. Then at 2 o'clock, the leader of Qatar is speaking. Echo response, ending the pandemic. Is that the one where... Oops. Is that the one where... No, it's not. Global cybersecurity. Ushering in a safe digital future. AI on the street. Managing the trust in the public square. Let's tune on that one. Really talking about AI.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carlo Ratti. I'm professor at MIT and also co-founder of Design Innovation Office, Carlo Ratti Associati. Great to moderate this amazing panel today, and we're going to talk about facial recognition and AI in our cities.
See?
Now, I just had several instances of facial recognition on the way.
Like, see, like, when they talk about, oh, it's a conspiracy theory that they're trying to run your lives. Okay, let's just have more facial recognition.
Yeah, to Davos. As you know, in the United States, when you're boarding a flight now, in many cases, it happens by facial recognition. It's even more spread in other countries. Like in China, it's used in offices, it's used extensively through cities. But at the same time, the same technology also raises many questions. There's a lot of resistance in some countries. There's also some cultural aspects. It depends. I think we'll hear about from some of the speakers about how they view it in their own domain, and both geographically and in terms of their activities. So that's the topic for the conversation. And after the initial fire started, then we'll open up for discussion altogether, for sharing ideas. I will ask our speakers to introduce themselves as they start talking. And I'd like to ask Takayuki first, to go first, with a question about something I was very involved and quite familiar with, which is the project by Google's sister company Sidewalk Lab in Toronto. Well, that project, they promise a very futuristic city, a city where data could actually help a lot people's lives. In the end, backfired.
Where people are completely spied on in everything that they do all day long.
And the project first was downsized and in the end stalled. The whole Sidewalk Lab actually a few months ago was folded into Google itself. And so I'd like to ask you, what type of lessons do we have from this, and when communities actually then are not on board when we talk about new technologies, and especially technologies that they see as violations of privacy.
Oh, thank you. And my name is Takayuki Morita, and the CEO of NEC Corporation. And we are a technology company, and especially focused on AI, and also the biometrics, and also the 5G communications areas. Those are everything are connected in a future of the communications and technologies. And then going back to your questions about Google's case, as far as I understand that the discussions have been and they done around like ownership of the data. And either Google is owning the data or the people still keep the data ownership. That kind of discussions have been made as far as I understand. But I don't think that is a center of the issue. Issue is whether the trust is existing. And trust...
So before we get into this, they're obviously going to frame this like, why we should be considerate of people's concerns or whatever. What they're actually concerned about is winning over trust and marketing these technologies to the public so that you and I are happy being spied on all day long.
To the system, trust to the technology, trust to the people who use those data. And trust is basically built based on the transparency. And transparency means what is the objectives? What is the targeted welfare beings and improved?
And by transparency, he means what are the reasons given to the public, again, to market the technology to them so that they buy into it and give their trust to something that's invading their privacy and destroying their privacy, right? Let's just go back to the quote that we started off with at the beginning. It's 2030. I own nothing. I have no privacy. I've never been happier.
How that safety level is improved. And also how that the kind of improved will be achieved. In that context, the data itself, who those data will be handled. Those things are not cleared. And that was the biggest issue, I think.
Thank you. No, thanks for sharing that. Now, you mentioned this at the city level. When we're talking about Google in Toronto is at the level of neighborhood, but the same technology actually is being deployed globally also at much finer scale. at the level of the building. And so here I'd like Koen to chime in. And Koen, you introduce yourself, but Koen is one.
All right, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but you get the point. This is other technology that they're discussing. Deciphering Latin America's future. Cold War 2.0. Michael McCall. I think there was like a ridiculous moment from this thing. Maybe it was a different one.
Raise questions if you have any. And I'd like to start with you, Ivana. You just came directly from Kiev yesterday, I think, or the day before yesterday, to Davos. How's the situation in Ukraine at the moment?
Well, thank you for having this discussion, and thank you for...
All right, let's skip this one. Sport as a unifying force. Klaus Schwab is in that one, too. Returning nature to cities. Returning nature to cities. Yeah. I think that means extending cities to destroy nature. The return of the West. Tackling youth mistrust. Well, that's probably an interesting one. Let's check in on that one.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Adrian Monk. Welcome to this session on tackling youth mistrust. We have a fantastic panel for you to talk about this afternoon, and we're really looking forward to your questions. So please have your most concentrated attention on. Get those questions ready for us when we're done paneling. But before we start, we've got a very special guest to introduce us, finding a break in his schedule, which I can assure you is the most packed in Davos. Very pleased and proud to introduce Professor Klaus Schwab. Sir.
Thank you, Adrian. And if there's one session very precious for me, it is this one. Because I founded the Global Shapers community just over 10 years ago. And now we have 500 hubs around the world in 500 different cities with over 15,000 active global shapers. If I'm depressed, which I rarely are, but then I would go to one of the shapers hub and recharge my energy. I think it's just amazing what those young people are doing. We request from each of the hubs to show its commitment to the purpose of the World Economic Forum by running at least one significant local initiative with a social purpose. And the Global Shapers, in the last 4 years alone, have undertaken more than 2,000 of such initiatives to facilitate and improve the lives of the citizens in their hubs. Now, why do we integrate the Global Shapers? You know, the World Economic Forum is a multi-stakeholder organization. We try to have each part of society very well integrated in what we are doing. And the young generation is not sufficiently represented in international and global decision making. Just think that the average age in the world is somewhere around 29, if I'm not mistaken. The average age of those who takes decisions about the future of this young generation is probably 55. So there is a mismatch. And so we decided at the World Economic Forum to create a special foundation which is associated with the forum, but which has its own autonomy, its own board, because we wanted to make sure that the global shapers have their own identity in the World Economic Forum. So I just wanted to introduce this fantastic community to you. and what they are doing, and I'm very glad to have under the leadership of you, Adrian, now a discussion with 4 of the shapers, which show you the outstanding caliber of those young people. And we could have also 15,000 here. And we have 50, by the way, here at the annual meeting, 50 from 50 different countries. And they will make sure that what we discuss here is also communicated to the whole Shapers community, and so is an interaction. So I can tell you, you will go through some fascinating minutes of dialogue and discussions. Adrian, back to you.
Professor Schwab, thank you very much indeed. And I'm going to ask our panelists to come up onto the stage. We have 4 fantastic global shapers, and we have an amazing colleague from the world of media, Kamal Ahmed, who has a stellar record in journalism in the UK, and is also founding a news organization that I think he'll tell you more about, but is going to tackle some of what we're talking about. So first off, tackling youth mistrust. The Global Shapers community surveys its members regularly, and this issue of trust comes up year after year after year.
Because there's no reason to trust the governments and corporations who are pillaging the planet. Because every objective measure that you would have would be that you're destroying the planet and making life worse for people, and young people can recognize that their lives are much worse than it was for their parents. So I think that people's mistrust is very well founded, and you're trying to get around that and trying to trick people into not being mistrustful of the institutions that are enslaving them. I think that's pretty immoral.
My generation, I was born in 1965, grew up in the shadow of nuclear war, the Cold War battle between...
What the fuck is happening right now? We're living in the shadow of nuclear war right now, thanks to people like you.
Between the US and the USSR, and that shadow lifted in 1989, giving us hope that the coming decades would see progress, would see peace, would see people coming together to tackle the big problems.
But there's no money in that for Raytheon, is there? How does Raytheon and Boeing make money off of peace? They don't. They need a boogeyman, don't they?
What have we seen in the last decades, in the first decades of the 21st century? We've seen income inequality. We've seen conflict. We've seen climate change. We've seen progress seemingly reverse on a whole realm of issues that I think any generation would expect those in power to have tackled or addressed or done something to move the needle on. And that really, I think, is underlying this issue of mistrust. But don't take my word for it. Take the word of these people. And I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about why they're members of this incredible Global Shapers community, and also why this topic of mistrust is so important to them. And I'm also going to ask Kamal, as a founder, who literally, I think his startup is weeks, if not months old, who's come into this environment wanting to use media and journalism to transform that relationship and transform that trust, to say a little bit about his mission and how the news movement is going to tackle some of that. But first, Miguel, I'm going to start with you and ask you just to say a few words.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you. This is an incredible honor just to be here with all of you. So a little bit about me. My background spans across social entrepreneurship, advocacy, and foreign affairs. So the one reason why I really care about this issue is because when I was 9 years old, my family and I were forcibly displaced from our home in Colombia by violence. So I experienced early on the impacts of conflict and misinformation, because that's what happened to my family, actually. We were falsely labeled as members of a group, and unfortunately, that's the reality for many other countries. And then later on, I translated some of that passion into social impact, entrepreneurship, and into co-creating solutions to make this a better world. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Miguel, thanks. Taylor, just been a change of government in the country you've left. Tell us a little bit more about you and about why this issue is something that gets you passionate.
Of course. So I'm a global shaper from the Sydney hub, and a week before the pandemic in 2020 took hold, I quit my job due to a long-held belief that if we are going to have truly collaborative and equitable global communities, we need the people who are least impacted by crisis to step up, take responsibility, and work in service of and in collaboration with those communities that are the most hit. And so 2020, I threw myself into that at an interesting time, which was testing and educational to say the least, but it really showed me what's possible in this community and what we achieved with the Davos lab and what we saw in the responses with the breakdown in trust and the fear felt by young people is really something that I'm entirely committed to serving with everything I have.
Thanks, Taylor. Taha, you've joined us from down Lake Lehman in Geneva. Tell us about your journey and what's got you passionate about this topic.
Thank you so much, first of all, for having us here. I
Come on.
grew up in Switzerland.
You're not prepared for that?
Over the summers, we would visit.
Who are you?
Visit refugee camps because of my father's work. And I remember very distinctly at the age of approximately 10, giving candy, as one would do, to other 10-year-olds just like me. And I was like, what's the difference between the two of us? I really haven't done much, per se. And it was at that moment, it created a lot of guilt over time, but it also instilled a certain belief that if I'm on this panel with you today, it's really not because I'm particularly smart or hardworking. It's because I had the right opportunities while I was growing up, particularly those.
So maybe apply that logic to the existence of the World Economic Forum. What the fuck gives any of you people the right to decide what's happening at a global level? It doesn't. You're all just privileged assholes who are trying to determine how I live my life and how my neighbor lives his life. You don't have any actual authority to have these kinds of conversations to dictate how the world operates. Just because you're all privileged fucking assholes doesn't mean you get to decide how technology is used and how our governments run. Like, don't we live in democracies? Don't we actually live in democracies where we have votes about things and where we have public debate on things? Or do we live in a society where you privileged fucking cunts all get together and decide what happens for the rest of us and how our governments are going to work for us and trick us into supporting policies that are against our interests?
It was outside of the classroom, so the confidence from my parents, the exposure. And we really wanted to give those opportunities, which we feel are just critical to maximizing young people's potential, to millions of others. And so we co-created, alongside my brother, an education technology company that helps young people maximize their potential by upskilling themselves and then connecting to opportunities, internships, scholarships, and jobs. And we work on that alongside governments, foundations, and corporates, which is just critical. The previous panel spoke about the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement, of governments setting the infrastructure and the setting for that. And so, failure
of corporations reaping wealth from the public via governments.
Just provide youth with a basic expectation around a dignified livelihood, which hopefully is connected to their skills.
Training people to go work for corporations
creates deep mistrust.
Olga, you've probably had one of the toughest journeys of anyone to get here from Kyiv. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your background, what's happening with you right now, and also why this topic means so much?
Yes, thank you. I'm very appreciative to be here today, to have the opportunity to raise the voice for Ukraine in other circumstances. To be honest, there were many projects I was working in the past. There were many career passes,
right,
many
guys.
personal aspirations. But to be honest,
we're getting to the point now where I want to listen to some of these things, but I understand we only have a little bit of time left, so I'm just going to try to focus on the big ones. I think you get the point. They're effectively trying to discuss every kind of issue where an elite class of people could affect policy in order to enrich themselves and extend their sphere of power. But again, let's just kind of cruise through these different conversations. Here's Henry Kissinger. Let's listen to this one.
Hello, Dr. Kissinger. Greetings from Geneva, and I should say from Davos. Do you hear us?
Yes, I hear you very well.
Yeah, no, you have here a great assembly, everybody interested in hearing your views, and I don't have to introduce you, Dr. Kissinger. I just would like to mention that I met you when I was at Harvard over 50 years ago.
Sorry guys, again, I'm not sure
and actually, you came to Davos the first time. It was in 2080, so over 40 years ago. And
did you say 2080?
It was in 2080. So
he came for the first time in 2080. Kissinger's first appearance was in 2080.
Actually, you came to Davos the first time. It was in 2080, so over 40 years ago. And I looked at your speech, which you gave in 1980, and I just want to quote one or two things. In your speech, you focused, and I quote, "The constantly changing
can't actually physically
world."
make it out to these
Does
things
it sound
anymore.
familiar? And then you said, and I quote, "the age of global interdependence," end of quote. And you warned of a, I quote, "of a delusion of confidence in classic models, a challenge to the system," and you concluded your speech by saying, "All of those changes are global and would make ours a period of turmoil, even apart from any specific challenge that we have to face." 1980. And now we are 42 years later. And of course, we are all very keen to hear how you assess the situation of today. And I had the pleasure to visit you just some weeks ago, and we have chosen, as I mentioned to you at that time, history at a turning point. We are really...
I know he's like 100 years old, but my God, he does not look good. He looks like he's struggling to breathe over here.
At the turning point. And this is not a speech, this is a conversation of, I would say, a young student and an experienced professor. So my first question to you, Henry, is, if you listen to the theme, history at a turning point, would you describe the new world which may evolve after this turning point, which we are living through at this moment?
First of all, let me thank you for permitting me to return to Davos, because it is such a crucial forum for the exchange of ideas, evolutions that are going on that will affect the outcome. Let me sketch the issues. The most vivid at the moment is the war in Ukraine. And the outcome of that war, in both the military and political sense.
This guy looks on his last leg, doesn't he? He's like struggling to speak here.
Will affect relations between groupings of countries, which I will mention in a minute. the outcome of any war has a peace settlement, but the nature of that peace settlement will determine whether the combatants remain permanent adversaries or whether it is possible to fit them into an international framework. About 8 years ago, when the idea of membership of Ukraine in NATO came up, I wrote an article in which I said that the ideal outcome would be if Ukraine could be constituted as a neutral kind of state, as a bridge between Russia and Europe, rather than as the front line of groupings within Europe.
I hate to agree with Henry Kissinger, but that seems pretty reasonable, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound pretty reasonable that it should be a neutral country, not an outpost of NATO?
I think that opportunity does not now exist in the same manner, but it could still be conceived as an ultimate objective. In my view, a movement towards negotiations and negotiations on peace need to begin the next 2 months or so. That the outcome of the war should be outlined by them before it creates upheavals and tensions that will not be even harder to overcome. And particularly between the eventual relationship of Russia towards Europe and of Ukraine towards Europe.
See, he knows, and because he was involved in the Nixon administration, right? And they had detente with Mao and with Brezhnev. He knows that you need to have engagement with Russia. Like, say what you want about Henry Kissinger, and I would say he's a war criminal who's responsible for the murder of tons of Vietnamese and Laotians and Cambodians, but nevertheless, like I think on a geopolitical chessboard scale understands that you can't have these nuclear superpowers on the verge of fighting a war with each other. So again, a broken clock is right twice a day. He's a war criminal, but he is right about this. Just like, Nixon, probably, one of the worst presidents ever, probably second worst behind Bush, was right to engage Mao and Brezhnev.
Ideally, the dividing line should return to the status quo ante. I believe pursuing the war beyond that point would turn it into a war not about the freedom of Ukraine, which has been undertaken with great cohesion by NATO, but into a war against Russia itself. And so this seems to me to be the dividing line, that it is just and possible to define, and it will be difficult. Any modification of that occurs during the negotiations, which of course have not yet been established, but which should begin to be the concern of the major participants as the war develops. And I have given outline of a possible military outcome, but one has to keep in mind that any modification of that will complicate the negotiations in which Ukraine has a right to be a significant participant, but in which one hopes that they match the heroism that they have shown in the war with wisdom for the balance that has been Europe.
Again, like he's draping this in the whole Western propaganda, but like again, just from like a geopolitical chessboard stance, he knows that Ukraine has to go to the negotiating table, for its own survival and for global peace, for to avoid the possibility of nuclear war.
Europe and in the world afterwards. The relationship that will develop as a result of this war, not between Ukraine, which will be probably the strongest conventional power on the continent, and the rest of Europe will be developed over a period of time. But one has to look at the relationship of Europe to Russia over a longer period, and in a manner that is separated from the existing leadership, whose status, however, will be affected internally over a period of time by its performance in this period. But looked at from a long-term point of view, Russia has been for 400 years an essential part of Europe, and European policy over that period of time has been affected fundamentally by its European assessment of the role of Russia, sometimes in a disturbing way, but on a number of occasions as the guarantor or the instrument by which the European balance could be re-established. We, in current policy, should keep in mind that a restoration of this goal is Europe, so that Russia is not driven into a permanent alliance with China.
Yep, see? So Russia is not driven into a permanent alliance with China. Again, this goes back to like 1984 logic here, right? Eurasia and East Asia. You have to play the two off of each other. We have pushed Eurasia and East Asia, Russia and China together. And Kissinger knows that's not good for Oceania. That's not good for NATO countries.
But European relations with are not the key element, and not the only key element of this altered picture. Russia and the China and the United States will, over the next years have to come to some definition of how to conduct the long-term relationship. The long-term relationship of countries, it depends on their strategic capacities, but also on their interpretation of these capacities. In recent years, China and the United States have evolved into a relationship that is unique in each side's history. That is, that they, from the point of view of strategic potential, they are the greatest threat to each other. In fact, the only military threat that each side needs to deal with.
I mean, again, I think Russia has way more ICBMs than China. I understand China has a huge population and huge military and like outnumbers our military, in terms of actual troops or whatever, but Russia has more nuclear weapons than we do.
Continuously. And so the challenge, the period in which I was involved in the creation of this relationship, in which it was thought that a period of permanent collaboration might emerge of the two countries becoming acquainted, has been partly jeopardized and for the present period, probably terminated by the growth in the strategic and technical competence of each other. So on that level, there is an inherent adversarial aspect. Now the challenge is whether this adversarial aspect can be mitigated and progressively eased by the diplomacy that both sides conduct. And it cannot be done unilaterally by one side. So both sides have to come to the conviction going to live in it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kissinger, for this state of the world description. We have, and I know he's not prepared for it, but we have here someone sitting whom I most admire also for his ideas, and he just has also published a very significant book. So Graham Allison, would you be ready to comment? And we need a microphone. Could you be ready to comment and maybe ask also Dr. Kissinger a final question? What is burning in your mind? But first, it would be interesting to have your comments.
Well, thank you very much.
I didn't get the name.
Your oldest student.
Graham Allison.
Graham Allison. No, Graham Allison, yeah.
I think Henry often refers to me as his oldest student and course assistant, and I tell him that's because I've been the slowest learner. So Henry, you're looking great.
Now that was a funny joke.
Henry was supposed to be having a 99th birthday party tonight in New York, but the circumstances didn't permit. So I can see you're dressed up for the party in any case, and I'm sorry I'm missing you there, but it's good to see you here. Henry, your overview was, as always, wonderful, and I think Klaus did a good job in reminding us of the 1980 remarks, where we can hear echoes. In 1980, though, China hardly figured in the picture the way it does today. So as you look at the relationship between the US and China, which, as you say, is inevitably and inherently going to be rivalrous and adversarial, but at the same time, if unmanaged, may end in a catastrophic war. And as we watch what's happening in Taiwan, and just to be timely in terms of the news, the comment of President Biden yesterday in Japan about Taiwan. You and I have talked about this before. I think that seems to me about the fastest path to a general full-scale war between the US and China. So I wonder, how are you thinking about Taiwan in the context of the need for the constraints and rules of the road that you described the necessity for, but that we now see the absence of?
Henry, do you want to respond?
Well, first of all, it's an unexpected pleasure to see Greg appear.
Maybe he is actually buffering a little bit. I don't know. I thought he was really struggling to speak, but it seems like his connection actually isn't that good. So maybe that was part of it.
To put this question, he was my student.
Yeah, okay. We don't care.
And he's my friend. In which it was achieved. And my understanding of the agreement has been that the United States would accept the principle of one China, that we would not insist on a two-China solution. And expressed was prepared.
I don't know which it is. It's written rough though. All right. I think we've gotten the gist of that one, right? So you had Kissinger there. All right. Global Economic Outlook press conference pioneering ways to strengthen digital trust with a label. Designer for disability, drive inclusion, Afghanistan, United States Economic Outlook. Hey, it's not good. There you go. Summarize that one for you. Strategic Outlook, the future of the global operations, building responsible data ecosystems. Again, folks, this is like a major focus. How do we build an Internet of Things? How do we build facial recognition? How do we monitor everything about every person? This is like a major focus of these people because they want to know everything about you and everything that you do and everything that you might do. Transforming through trust. That's another part of it too, right? Marketing, trust, building trust in the establishment, getting you to believe in your leaders. Creating a global skills framework. The post-pandemic city, not business as usual. Central bank digital currencies. Sure, that's an interesting one. Embracing climate adaptation action. Wake-up call from nature. All right, guys, that was day one. There was 3 other days, including today. So again, let's just cruise through these and see if there's anything that we want to watch here. Tax systems, global workforce, growing up in the pandemic, China, responding to new migration flows in Europe, where will the jobs of tomorrow come from, securing systemically important critical infrastructure, global ESG for global resilience, delivering on the 1 billion lives challenge, unlocking digital innovation, leading with empathy in times of crisis, strategic outlook for the digital economy, youth perspectives on global issues. It's funny, it doesn't say any speakers on that one. This session requires registration. Please visit the homepage for more details. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted every aspect of our lives. Yet before the onset of the crisis, the social and economic integration of young people was a challenge. Unless urgent action is taken, young people are likely to suffer severe and long-lasting impacts from the pandemic. Join this interactive dialogue with co-authors of the World Economic Forum's Youth Recovery Plan, featuring insights and ideas of more than 2 million youth around the world. Okay. Special address by Pedro Sanchez, Prime Minister of Spain. Travel and tourism. Strategic outlook on ASEAN. The rise of the stay-at-home economy. Responsible consumption. Geopolitical outlook. President of the European Commission. Financing resilient economies and societies. Hybrid work. What happens next? We work all day long, every waking hour of your lives. You're on call for your job, and on weekends, and during your kids' softball games, you're on call for work. Leadership in an era of rolling crises. Lord Mark Malloch Brown. Special address by Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Speeding up on the road to net zero, investing in health equity. India at 75, absorbing the commodity shock, financial inclusion, addressing the largest gaps. How detached are markets from economic reality? Will the M&A boom last? The journey towards racial equity. Press conference, launch of Generation Valuable. Okay. Bolstering the world's crisis management capacity. What was in that one? Strengthening trust in public-private data exchanges. There, see? That's a key one. Again, we don't have time to look at this, but this is a key one here, folks. Strengthening trust in public-private data exchanges. Culture shock. Safeguarding our planet and people. Maryland Global Gateway Initiative. Latin America Presidential Panel. Working together for peace. Yeah, I'm sure a big part of that is sanctioning Russia, right? Accelerating corporate investment in nature. A cost of living crisis. A conversation with Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube. She can talk about how we need to combat disinformation. I'm sure that's the major focus there. A new security architecture of the Middle East, shaping the future of investing. The future of crypto. It's the second one in crypto. Energy security and the European Green Deal. The entrepreneurship revolution. A global movement of to accelerate progress on the SDGs. A conversation with Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. Driving LGBTQI plus resilience through equity. Unlocking the potential of blue carbon. Strategic outlook on South Asia. Building future-ready local economies. Unlocking capital at scale for digital inclusion. Preparing for Africa's growing global role. Securing Europe. Financing a just transition in emerging markets. Shaping the integrated energy future towards a global treaty on plastic pollution, preparing for the next pandemic. Bill Gates is in that one.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Mehta. I'm the CEO of a company called Mansueto Ventures. We publish Fast Company and Inc. magazines, and I'm delighted to moderate today's panel on preparing for the next pandemic. As you know, roughly one human...
That's what Gates says here.
Well, the ideal is that when you have outbreaks, that you detect them early and you contain them before they go global. You know, less than 2% of the deaths are in the first 100 days. And
I know, like, this guy's been he was the world's richest man for a while, but, like, can we just put context again? This guy is a computer programmer. What the hell does he know about controlling pandemics? Like, did he go to school to study the spread of viruses in society? Why is he an authority on this subject?
Infectious disease is an exponential phenomena. And so if you let it run, then it's very difficult to rein it back in. The true exemplars, the variance between the death rates in countries with similar GDPs is quite dramatic. You have almost, a factor of 50 between the good performers and the poor performers, where sadly the U.S. Is in that poor performer category. And there's clear things that they did. If those were done early around the outbreak, then you could prevent it from spreading to lots and lots of countries. So that certainly should be the goal, is to not let it go global.
And we'll explore some of those very specific things that countries and institutions can do to help prevent the next.
It's going to have the toughest job.
A coordinated effort. What is the path to creating some sort of global response so that we can help the weakest link get stronger?
Well, there certainly was time enough for some countries to respond and have, very, very mild pandemics. Ground zero, wherever the emergence takes place, is always going to have the toughest job. Will they see an elevation in respiratory symptoms? Will they see an elevation in deaths? Will they run a diagnostic panel? They're not going to be sequencing everything. But when you get an elevation, or you get your normal diagnostic panel showing something unusual, then you've got to start sequencing. And, so there could be more delay in reaction if we have a country
contending with a war in Ukraine, even as we are contending with the potential for a recession, even as we're contending with high inflation. Countries still need to, and leaders in private sector still need to make pandemic preparedness or prevention a top priority. How do we do that when there are other concerns that keep creeping into the conversation?
Well, we're certainly at risk that global health issues may get deprioritized as there's so much else going on, whether it's the ongoing pandemic, or as Peter says, however you characterize HIV, malaria, and TB, where the equity issue there is super dramatic. And it's good in a way that, when infectious diseases hit rich countries, it reminds people, wow, we're not the only ones suffering from this. What about these great tools that we have access to? When the prevalence goes down in the rich countries, that awareness tends to diminish. Now,
that would be bad, wouldn't it? If there were less sick people in the rich countries? He seems to have a problem with that.
Various bilateral programs like US PEPFAR and the Multilateral Global Fund have done a good job reducing a lot of that inequity. But it'll be an interesting test. There's a replenishment that comes up probably in the last quarter, where Global Fund's going to go out and ask for an increase from 14 billion to 18 billion. And we'll see, in the face of all these priorities that are, I agree, absolutely important priorities, can global health maintain the visibility that it deserves?
And what if it doesn't, Bill? What happens if it doesn't?
Lots of work to do on this pandemic, lots of work to do on those three diseases, and lots of work to do on those health systems. That's the front line for all the things we're talking about. And those investments, are very dramatic in terms of the payoffs you get, in terms of the human capacity you get by getting rid of these disease burdens.
Maybe I'll add one other dimension to this discussion, because public health funding is going to be an important factor here in terms of combating the future
countries. The percentage of the R&D budgets that go towards the things that cause the most deaths is well under 2%. So there's a little bit of a mismatch of what the excitement is, N=1 type.
Yeah, and we need to change that. I mean, absolutely, the priority going forward has to be much more around the needs of the developing world. We cannot have this biology be, a tool for the wealthy. And so we saw that in the pandemic, and we saw how we all have.
Back to you, Bill. You're an investor. You're somebody who cares deeply about innovation. How do we incent innovators to focus on biology for the underserved market?
Well, markets work for lots of things, but markets do not work to incent investment in malaria eradication or, TB vaccination. Those are incredibly expensive things that the affected countries, don't have the resources, and there's no market for those things. So the term investor, if that means you're seeking profit, no, I'm not an investor. If it means trying to improve, the 300,000 kids who die every year of malaria, then yes, the metric is always going to be lives saved. And, the greatest underinvestment is still in infectious disease. As we make progress there, we will want to move up and do non-infectious disease, non-communicable disease, NCDs is the term people use. And some of those, the therapies are getting cheap enough now.
Need to happen as part of this broader conversation about pandemic preparedness?
Well, it's fantastic that in the area of diagnostics, we should be able to use low-cost approaches that still report the data back and ramp those up. There are a new generation of diagnostic machines.
All right, well, let's again continue looking through what else there is here. NATO in the Nordics. So again, talking about NATO expansion, rebuilding resilient food and land use systems, crypto's carbon footprint. It's another one in cryptocurrency. The future of workplace learning, human-centered trade, investing responsibly in sustainable governance, defining the U.S. in a changing world. Okay. Why are we having a World Economic Forum meeting on defining the U.S. in a changing world? How about the people of the United States define what the United States is? Ethical decision-making in times of crisis, our shared humanity concert. This is actually a concert. Well, I gotta see this. This is actually music.
Which should celebrate solidarity. Solidarity, particularly with the Ukrainian people.
How does this guy not get tired?
Solidarity with everyone.
How old is this guy? 1938, so he's what, 84?
Music is selected.
So
guess we needed some more Ukraine propaganda. So that's that. So that was day 2. So let's move on to day 3, which was yesterday. Financing net zero, moving from commitment to action, a freshwater future. What next for global growth? Strategic outlook on Japan. Again, why can't the people of Japan decide their own future? Pfizer and partners announce accord for a healthier world.
Welcome all to the Accord for a Healthier World press conference here at the World Economic Forum in Davos. I'd like to, before we get to the big announcement, I would like to introduce my esteemed panelists. We are joined today by Dr. Albert Bourla, Chief Executive Officer and Chairman at Pfizer, His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus McCarthy Chakwera, President of the Republic of Malawi, Mr. Bill Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Ms. Angela Wong,
Again,
Group President of the Pfizer
Why is Bill Gates on this?
Group.
Why?
Thank
Why
you
is
all.
Bill Gates on this board?
Today, we are announcing the Accord for a Healthier World. Dr. Bourla, Can you tell us more about what you are announcing today?
Thank you very much, Alem. And first I want to thank His Excellency Paul Kagame, the President of Rwanda, and His Excellency Lazarus Chakwera, the President of Malawi, and of course Bill Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and our very distinguished guest sitting here. Angela and I, we are very, very proud and thankful that you are here. We are living in a time where science is increasingly demonstrating the ability to take on the world's most devastating diseases. Unfortunately, there exists a tremendous health equity gap in our world that determines which of us can use these innovations and which of us cannot. With all we have learned and accomplished over the past 2 years, the time is now to begin closing this gap even more. In this spirit, Pfizer is excited and proud to launch an accord for a healthier world. Through this groundbreaking initiative, Pfizer will provide all its patented medicines and vaccines that are available in the US or in the European Union on a non-for-profit basis to 1.2 billion people living in 45 lower-income countries. This includes all 27 low-income countries, as well as all 18 countries that have transitioned from low-income to lower middle-income classification in the last 10 years. This commitment will include all future Pfizer medicines and vaccines as they are launched, discovered, and launched as well.
Oh, great. So they can get all the boosters. Who's footing the bill for that, by the way? Is that coming out of Pfizer's bottom line?
Progress and innovation in global health.
Well, the primary focus of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is to improve health equity. That's what Melinda and I picked back in the year 2000, where we first got going. And partnerships with a company like Pfizer have been key to the progress we've made. And for example, Gavi got started, actually announced here at Davos. One of the most important vaccines, the one that saved the most lives of all, is the pneumococcus vaccine. And Pfizer was the innovator there with their Prevnar product. And they've been providing that at low cost so that it can get out to all the children of the world. Today's announcement is a strong additional commitment by Pfizer to take their incredible capabilities and make sure that they get out to everyone in the world.
Okay, so Pfizer is giving their vaccine to all the people of the world. It's I'd like to buy the world of Coke. I'd like to buy the world of Pfizer vaccine. All right, economic case for education, the biotech revolution. The biotech revolution. Turning words into action, states of concern. Some of these are kind of vague, aren't they? Accelerating sustainable value chains, rethinking the EU's partnership with its neighborhood. Saudi Arabia outlook. European unity in a disordered world. Is globalization dead? I wish. Thomas Friedman was at that one. A conversation with Gina Raimondo, United States Secretary of Commerce. How many of the U.S. government officials are at this thing? Food systems in crisis, a roadmap for action. Advancing digital cooperation. Again, it's all about data. It's all about sharing the data of all the people of the world with the people in power. A new pathway for the Amazon basin. Climate action starts at home. Rethinking infrastructure for the coming decade. Generation disruption. Millennials take the helm. Press conference. First Movers Coalition announce expansion. Crises, experimentation, innovation. Transitioning to a green Middle East. Conversation with Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Prime Minister of Greece. Global CEOs announce collective action on cyber resilience. Right. The path to decarbonizing aviation. Building responsible supply networks. Outlook for inflation. The diversity, equity, and inclusion outlook. Investing in climate change adaptation in fragile context. A nuclear option. I'm assuming they mean nuclear power, not nuclear war. A discussion about equality. Shaping a shared future, making the metaverse. Changing the game for circular innovation, balancing globalization and resilience in a time of crises. Taking the long view, safeguarding the future of the internet. A lost decade, a new era of industrial development. Conversation with Albert Bourla, CEO of Pfizer. Klaus Schwab is on that one too. A conversation with Alex Karp, CEO of Palantir. Actually, wasn't this the one where, like, I think he says something about, like, conspiracy theorists on this one?
Good afternoon. I have the great pleasure to start a dialogue with one of the chief executives, probably most in the news last year, and also, Dr. Willer, you made today a very groundbreaking announcement. We will certainly come back, but I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Albert Bourla, who is since 2019, just before the COVID crisis broke out. You were nominated chairman and CEO of Pfizer. And what formidable journey in the last 30 months. And you certainly have made a major contribution that many of us became resistant against the virus. So thank you on behalf of everybody. And I think what is remarkable is the fact that you went into this direction or venture without asking for public help, as far as I know, because you could have probably had access to billions of dollars, but you did it yourself. You did it alone, together with your partner, also BioNTech. Now, I just said that you made a major announcement, a groundbreaking announcement.
There was something in here where, like, I think he says something about, like,
restricted the cost to make low income,
say that
but they graduate to higher level.
Demonetize
make
or
an
delete
impact.
my video
You
for
have to
using
make a
that
difference.
word.
So you are becoming really a global health provider. And
Unfortunately, I wish to be able to do
traditional, successful products, and now suddenly you have an overriding objective. How did you manage this? And for those who do not know, there are no restrictions anymore, so we set the standard that we require vaccination. Now, how many vaccinations do we need in the future?
It's a very good question. And I think
infinite number, as many as they can possibly pump out. That's how many. How many vaccinations do people need? As many as Pfizer can possibly make.
We require vaccination. Now, how many vaccinations do we need in the future?
It's a very good question. And I think, first of all, I think we will need vaccinations in the future, but also I'm concerned that the compliance of the population with the recommendations of the experts will not be very high. More people did the first dose, and then lesser did the second.
He's concerned about your compliance.
And then lesser will do the third and the fourth. And so for that reason, we need to find a solution that makes it easy for people to get. And I think this solution, it is the number one priority is to have a vaccine that lasts a year. So once people know that it is once a year, I do it every autumn, for example, fall, I think that will improve the amount of people that are getting it.
I can't wait for my yearly monkeypox vaccine that I'm mandated to get.
And I think there are also certain attempts to combine it with a anti-flu vaccine.
That is another very good way to make it, to improve compliance. If someone thinks that I'm going to go to the doctor or to the pharmacy, but at least with one shot I will get two, flu and that also will increase the number. So these are the things. It's very difficult to improve the efficacy right now. It's very, very high. But what you can improve it is how convenient it is and how can last the efficacy for a longer period of time.
It's a question which I ask now to the audience is maybe not fair, but despite, let's say, no restrictions in Switzerland, we insisted on being vaccinated, being tested twice, and this may become a standard for future meetings anyway. I mean, if we are not getting rid of the virus, anybody who felt this was too much, or I said it's an unfair question because who will dare? Who will dare? But I just can share with you we had many internal discussions. Now, when you
do you see how this is inherently not representative of the people of the world? You have this elite class of people in this room who are all on board with these certain policies, who are all adhering to certain policies in order to even be part of this group. I mean, and it's reflected in their class overall. They're not representative of the people of the world. They're not representative of popular opinions of things, yet they are the ones determining how our governments and how our major corporations are going to behave. This is why this is fundamentally anti-democratic.
Albert, when you look at, let's say, the process to get approval, and usually it's a very FDA, as a European authority, it's a very cumbersome process.
All right, guys, I know we've been at this for a long time. I guess we're, unfortunately not going to be able to peruse as much as I kind of was hoping. There was a lot, President of Israel, there was a lot of stuff that they went through. Soros talked at one point here, talking about the gig economy. I mean, there was more stuff today that's probably hasn't even made the news yet. Oh, they had one on the freedom of press. You know who would have been a great guest for the freedom of press speech there, board there? Julian Assange should have been part of that. Why wasn't Julian Assange invited to that? Oh, I know. Because he actually reflects the ideals of a free press, and he's in jail because of that. So again, folks, there's just way too much to really go on. There's just too much to even get through everything that happened here. Just because there's multiple speeches per hour, like it would actually take days to even watch everything. But I think that you generally get the gist of what the World Economic Forum is, the topics that they discuss, and how they are, again, undemocratically determining what happens in all of our lives, and how they want to capture more of the commons and control your life and my life more. And again, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's all right here. You can sit here for days watching it, listening to these people. These are the most powerful and most wealthy people in the world, meeting to discuss issues that affect your life and my life. And here's George Soros.
Time for the conversation.
He had a speech
and I
too.
see a man who is hard to miss, who's already going to rise to
reality.
It's these ancient people that control all the money, have all the influence on our governments. And they're the ones determining what happens in our lives, setting the paradigms under which we live, under which we exist, determining what the kind of compliance that we have, determining what kind of rules we all have to live under. This is inherently undemocratic. This is not a democratic forum. This is not the World Economic Forum is not democratic, and it's creating situations. And it's creating a paradigm under which that we're living that's not democratic, and it's capturing our natural resources, capturing our personal data. And again, this is just something that, it sounds like you're a conspiracy theorist when you object to these things, because again, you're coming from a place of not being powerful, of being disenfranchised, complaining about what the people in power are trying to do to you. But it is real, right? It's not a theory. It's all here. You could sit here for days going through all of it, listening to what all their scheming and plotting is for our lives. And you have to wonder, especially in the light of all the talk about Russia and China in here, who is a bigger threat to your personal freedom? Is it Russia? Is it China? Is it Iran? Is it North Korea? Is it Venezuela? Is it Cuba? Or is it the World Economic Forum? Is it these fucking assholes who are all getting together to plot what your life is going to be like in 2030 when you don't own anything and don't have any privacy, and you're going to be happy about it, and you're going to comply with all of the vaccine mandates? So again, it's all bullshit, and it's all there for anybody to see. So that's that. I appreciate you guys sticking through and watching all this. I know it's been a long stream today. Let's just see if there's any more live chats. I know I kind of went through them earlier. I wish there was a way for me to like see them all. It's like it deletes some of them. Well, anyway, folks, again, I appreciate you watching. I know this was a long one. There's just so much to go through, and it's it's disheartening, right, to like sit through it and listening to these fucking assholes. Like, what gives them the right? What gives Bill Gates? What gives George Soros? What gives Klaus Schwab? What gives these people the right to decide what our lives are going to be like and determine the paradigms under which we live? It's not fair. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to me. It's anti-democratic. And they wave the flag like, oh, we represent freedom and democracy in an open society. No, you fucking don't. No, you don't. You represent a bunch of rich and powerful assholes who are scheming together to destroy the planet and to push policies that have been destroying the planet, to market those same policies pushed into overdrive as a solution to the problems that you created. So again, it's a terrible thing, and it's not a conspiracy theory. It actually does exist. Again, you can sit through and watch all of these videos all day long. It would probably take all week to actually get through all of them. But yeah, it's just it's a terrible thing. And like we need NATO disbanded, we need the World Economic Forum disbanded. So yeah, folks, again, thank you for watching today.